A mother stands in court, accused of killing her own son. The crowd outside is cheering, not in sorrow, but in celebration. Tiffany Meek has just been denied bail. The charge? Murder. The evidence? Still in question, and yet the public has already made up its mind. But what if they're wrong? What if the real story isn't about what Tiffany did, but what everyone missed? This is the case that has divided a nation, and it's only just beginning. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 2,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 3,000, then 5,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your DNA on that subscribe button, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. It began with a phone call, a call that no emergency line ever wants to receive, calm on the surface, but frantic underneath. A mother reporting her son missing, yet somehow oddly reserved. Tiffany Nicole Meek told authorities she couldn't find her 7-year-old boy, Jayden-Lee. Her voice didn't shake. Her tone was steady. But the story? It was already unraveling. When first responders arrived at the Fleurhof residence, what they found was far more sinister than a missing child. Jayden wasn't lost. He wasn't out playing. He wasn't even alive. His small body was discovered inside the home, in a bed, covered, lifeless, cold, not hidden, not buried, just there, as if he'd been there the entire time, as if someone wanted it to be found that way. Authorities pronounced him dead on the scene. What wasn't immediately known was when he had died, and how long he'd been there. In that moment, the home transformed from a crime scene to a symbol. A quiet suburb's illusion of safety shattered in a single afternoon. Rumors moved faster than the investigation. Some said he was suffocated. Others whispered about foul play. The most unsettling theory, that his own mother, Tiffany, was involved. That theory took root almost instantly, and it spread. And yet, many in the community weren't so quick to judge. They asked, what mother could do this? What if she didn't? Was there someone else in the house? A break-in? An accident? Or a frame-up? But what made this case different was not just the horror, it was the reaction. Before the autopsy, before the charges, before the hearings, the people of Fleurhof rose up. Mothers held vigils. Children painted signs. Black cards were lifted. The message was loud, even if the truth was still silent. Justice for Jayden. This wasn't just a death, it was a reckoning. And it was only the beginning. When the handcuffs finally clicked around Tiffany Meek's wrists, they didn't echo in silence. They roared across South Africa. The arrest wasn't sudden. It came after weeks of public outrage, subtle contradictions in her statements, and a growing mountain of community suspicion. But once the announcement dropped, Tiffany Nicole Meek had been officially charged with murder and defeating the ends of justice. The mood in Fleurhof shifted from grief to fury. The charge of murder was devastating, but the second, defeating the ends of justice, was damning. It meant that beyond the accusation of killing her own son, authorities believed she had attempted to mislead, obstruct, or derail the investigation entirely. It pointed to concealment, lies, and intent. In court, she looked smaller than she had outside, physically present, but emotionally distant. Tiffany didn't speak to the media. She didn't glance at the cameras. Her hands remained folded, her eyes mostly downcast, only occasionally glancing at the gallery behind her, where her mother, brother, and boyfriend sat like immovable stones. But the quiet wasn't shared by everyone. The courtroom was packed, wall to wall with Fleurhof residents, activists, and grieving mothers. Many had shown up in black. Many were ready to shout. But the anger had matured into something colder: vigilance. They weren't just there to mourn Jayden-Lee. They were there to watch, to ensure that this time, the system didn't flinch. Representing Tiffany Meek was advocate Novan Naidu, a seasoned but visibly weathered attorney who argued with restraint. His voice didn't rise. He didn't dramatize. His strategy was simple: humanize her. A mother in mourning, a misunderstood woman, a victim of public prejudice. But it wasn't enough. The magistrate, Annalene Africa, listened carefully, but the facts spoke louder than the defense. The contradictions in Tiffany's affidavit, the questionable address, the potential risk of flight, and the strange absence of any emotional outbursts from a mother accused of losing everything. One by one, the pillars of her bail request were knocked down. And then came the moment. The verdict: bail is denied. The room didn't cheer, but it cracked. A gasp, a murmur, and outside, jubilation. People clapped. Some cried. Others simply stood in silence, shoulders trembling with years of distrust in a system they finally felt had listened. But inside, Tiffany wept, harder than she had at any previous hearing. Not during the memorial, not during the sit-downs, not even when her son's body was discovered. But here, at the denial of her freedom, the tears came. And that, for many watching, said everything. In every case, evidence is the lifeline of truth. But in this case, it may also be the source of its greatest doubt. As Tiffany Meek's bail hearing unfolded, advocate Novan Naidu did not come with a dramatic revelation or a surprise witness. Instead, he came with quiet, pointed accusations, aimed not at the public, not at the community, but at the investigation itself. He argued that from the beginning, the case had been marred by what he called procedural oversight. And one by one, he laid out his claims. The first, a blood-stained towel, allegedly discovered near the scene. According to Naidu, this towel was photographed, noted, and never collected by forensic teams. No DNA tests, no proper chain of custody, just left behind like a forgotten clue in a crime that demanded nothing be overlooked. Then came the photos, the visual evidence meant to establish timelines and confirm Tiffany's presence or absence at critical moments. But there was a problem: several images bore no time or date stamps. In any other case, this might have been a minor technicality, but in this one, every second matters. The crime scene, too, became a battleground of credibility. It was left unsealed for an extended period, giving rise to the possibility, Naidu argued, that evidence could have been contaminated, tampered with, or worse, staged. And it was that word, staged, that led him to his most controversial claim: Jayden-Lee's school bag. According to Tiffany's defense, the bag had initially not been found. It only appeared later, under unusual circumstances. Naidu hinted, without naming names, that its sudden appearance was more convenient than coincidental, that perhaps, just perhaps, it had been planted. The court went still. The prosecutor objected. The magistrate noted it. But the damage was already done. For the first time since Tiffany Meek was arrested, the narrative bent, not because it shattered, but because doubt had been introduced. And in criminal justice, doubt, whether strategic or sincere, is a powerful tool. Of course, none of this exonerated Tiffany. None of it erased the fact that her son had died under her roof, in her care, under unexplained circumstances. But the defense wasn't trying to clear her name. Not yet. They were trying to slow the system down, to plant their own seed. Was someone else involved? Could this have been a rushed investigation? Was public pressure pushing the state toward a premature conclusion? No answers came, just silence, and the growing weight of a case that no longer felt open and shut. By this stage in the bail proceedings, the courtroom was no longer just a courtroom. It had become a stage, and outside, the streets were its echo. The prosecution rose, firm, focused, and unshaken by the defense's effort to poke holes in the investigation. They weren't here to argue every towel, photo, or theory. They were here to keep Tiffany Meek behind bars. Their reasons, as the lead prosecutor calmly stated, this wasn't about guilt or innocence yet. It was about risk, measurable, dangerous, and real. Risk of flight. Tiffany Meek, according to the state, had no fixed residence. She had given conflicting addresses during her initial questioning. That alone, they argued, made her a potential absconder. Risk of interference. She had been active in the search for her son even after, as the prosecution subtly implied, she may have already known the truth. That level of emotional performance, they suggested, showed a capacity to manipulate perceptions. Risk to public order. And then there was the street outside. Dozens, then hundreds of angry Fleurhof residents gathered at the courthouse gates. They held up placards with Jayden's photo. Some read, "No bail for child killers." Others bore messages too raw to repeat. What started as protest had begun to resemble a public reckoning. There were shouts of celebration when the judge leaned toward a ruling of postponement. There were calls for the harshest sentence possible before a trial had even begun. And for a justice system already under scrutiny, this raised an unsettling question. Was justice still being served, or was it being swept away by the flood of public opinion? Because this wasn't just a grieving town, this was a nation watching and deciding. The state held its line. Tiffany Meek, they insisted, must remain in custody. Too many questions, too many inconsistencies, and too much at stake. But behind every legal argument and courtroom submission was a pressure that no affidavit could erase. The sound of voices outside, chanting, demanding. Mourning Jayden-Lee's name was everywhere. But the truth, that still hadn't shown up. By law, a person is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But in cases like this, does the law still hold? Or does public rage rewrite the rules? Tiffany Meek now sits in a cell, not yet convicted, not yet tried, and yet the weight of judgment already bears down on her. Not just from the courtroom, but from the world outside its walls. Her defense attorney, Novan Naidu, didn't just argue for bail on legal grounds. He raised a darker concern, one that rarely gets mentioned in court transcripts. My client, he warned, may not be safe even inside. Because when you are branded a child killer, whether rightly or wrongly, there are no safe places. Correctional facilities are not neutral zones. Word spreads quickly. And in a country where child-related crimes spark not just outrage, but fury, the accused can become a target behind bars. That danger is real. And in Tiffany's case, it's more than theoretical. So we ask, is keeping her in custody truly for the sake of justice? Or is it the state's way of shielding her from a community that may not wait for a verdict? Outside the courthouse, chants of "let her rot" echoed into the sky. Inside, Tiffany wept, not just for her son, not just for her lost freedom, but for what her life now represented. The law tells us she's innocent until proven guilty. The system says this isn't punishment, it's protection. But ask anyone on the street, and they'll tell you she's already convicted in the court of public opinion. So which prison is more dangerous? The one with bars and guards, or the invisible one built from fear, fury, and unforgiving eyes? Justice walks a tightrope in cases like this, between the need to protect and the temptation to punish. No bail, no freedom, no clear date for what comes next. That's where we stand in the case of Tiffany Meek. The magistrate's decision was final, at least for now. She will remain in custody until her trial begins. But no one knows when that will be. Not her attorneys, not the family, not even the public demanding closure. The date remains blank. In the vacuum of silence, others are stepping in. Two private investigators, both unaffiliated with the state, have publicly offered their services. Their claim, "We will find the real killer." It's a phrase that stings, a phrase that suggests more than doubt. It suggests possibility. Possibility that Tiffany Meek might be innocent. Possibility that someone else, someone still walking free, knows exactly what happened to Jayden-Lee. But if that's true, why hasn't the state said more? Why, after weeks of public hearings, emotional testimony, and procedural debate, are there still key parts of the evidence kept from the public? The blood-stained towel, allegedly left behind. The unsealed crime scene. The undated photographs. The school bag that appeared in one version of events, but not another. The state's silence on these questions is deafening. And while prosecutors build their case, the streets continue to murmur. In Fleurhof, in corners of the internet, even in hushed conversations outside courthouses, the question no one wants to say too loudly still lingers: did we get this right? Or are we watching a system trying too hard to look certain, while standing on uncertain ground? The next move belongs to the court, but the next wave of pressure, it belongs to the public. And make no mistake, it's building. The cameras have shut off. The crowd outside the courthouse has gone home. And Tiffany Meek, mother of the late Jayden-Lee, sits alone behind bars. Now the question that lingers isn't just legal. It's moral, it's emotional, and it's deeply unsettling. Is Tiffany Meek a grieving mother, wrongly targeted by a public desperate for justice? Or did justice finally catch up with her? One child, one lifeless body, one mother with too many unanswered questions in her wake. The bail judgment may have offered temporary closure to an angry crowd, but it's also exposed something deeper, a crack in the system itself. A system where the police, the courts, and the community no longer move in trust, but in tension. Because in that courtroom, it wasn't just Tiffany Meek on trial, it was the investigation, the evidence, the speed, the silence. And when justice begins to look like vengeance, everyone pays the price. So now we wait for a trial date, for testimony, for truth to rise from beneath the noise. And as we wait, one question echoes across a country haunted by tragedy after tragedy. Is this just another name on the list, or the one that finally shakes the system forever?